Nice. Welcome in. This is that's Lysander Spooner,
That's right.
the Legacy, right?
That's right.
And we have yet another special episode with another special guest. As always, everybody's special when they come on the
Yeah.
Legacy, right? That's what we want to make it to where everybody gets their piece and everybody gets their thoughts out and their perspective. So I am the Legacy of Jennifer and Kaiser. I'm Zachary Kaiser. I am your captain. Engage Andrew Joseph. He's Andrew Joseph, as I just said, and we have he goes by the moniker, handle, whatever you want to call it, on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Mike Decentralize, coming from sunny Southern California, as his background photo on our video feed shows. So, and then we got South Carolina in the mix, although you can't really tell with your anime background, which is kind of neat, Andrew.
Well,
So,
thank you.
and then so yeah, and then me, I mean, I'm just coming from the north.
Yeah.
Lysander Spinners representing the north.
Yeah.
So
Spooner, Spooner.
so but this is gonna be another episode of the Legacy, right? We do gotta drop the ad. I'll try to make it short and sweet, bittersweet. Uh for all your woodworking needs, necessities, trying to start some open business for my cousin. Go to fanghornforesters.com if you ever watched The Lord of the Rings. His surname, my family name is Ent. And remember the Ents, the little tree people, tree beard. Fanghornforesters.com out of the Fanghorn Forest. And it just and he does anything from custom woodworking to things that he already markets, like knife cutting boards, coasters, et cetera, et cetera. He also does a little mobile mill work if you're in the greater Cincinnati uh, area, southeastern Indiana, northern Kentucky. That's where he does his mobile mill work. But I'm gonna not go extensive on it, and let's get to the show. So, how is everybody doing this wonderful Monday morning as we record, which will be a future drop,
Yeah.
hopefully, at the end of the week.
But yeah, I got that wrong. Great. It's great to be here. Thank you. I'm feeling good.
Thanks for joining
Uh,
us.
yeah, thank you for joining us. Yeah, we should have let you know before we came on. Like, we don't do lives yet, so
That's
maybe
okay.
down the road.
I think it was the sentiment was right, at least. Yeah.
So, and no, I mean, hey, hopefully, if people will hopefully gravitate towards the conversation we're about to have, and definitely open up and listen in. So I'm very hopeful. So I wish we could have a live right now, but Andrew is just too stuck in his ways to get prepared for lives. I'm
That's
blaming you, Andrew.
What am I supposed
that's
to do with myself? I'm bald.
So, but eventually we will. We will. So, Mike, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself before we get started, and what what the Liberty Movement has always been about to your life and what you've been doing all these years from
all these many years.
from your
Yeah.
history, oh
Yeah.
yeah,
I
through your history to now, if
yeah.
you'd
I've been,
like.
yeah, as brief about this as I can as well, because I've been at this a long time. I was
Hmm.
yeah. I'm 54 now. I got first intrigued by uh, the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement in 1988 when I was first legally able to vote.
Hmm.
And I was intrigued by this guy Ron Paul and the Libertarian Party. I'm like, what's this? This is really. I think I believe this more than I believe like anything else, right?
Hmm.
And I ended up voting for Ron Paul in 1988. Still didn't take a plunge and register libertarian until 1991. I was attending Chapman University down here in Orange County, California, and a
Hmm.
speaker named Richard Body came to speak, and this guy blew my mind. I owe you guys a video clip of one of his speeches because he's a fiery, like Afro American preacher kind of libertarian, right? He was just like
Hmm.
it just blew my mind. Like this is exactly my where I'm at, and I registered libertarian on the spot when I was still in school, and have always been since then. Like I've been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of there's been plenty of goofy periods in party history. Like a lot of people are complaining about, oh, just in recent years. No, it's always been kind of up and down, right? I'd say one of the worst periods was between 2008 to about fairly recently, also, but particularly 2008, low point for the party. But for the most part, I mean, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm in it for like all the even the goofy periods. I think that the Libertarian Party is still an effective means of self-defense. Because I despise the electoral system and electoral politics for obvious reasons, but that's part of our discussion today. Is that I still think engaging with it is a legitimate form of self-defense, even though philosophically, I'm like, you guys, I'm an agorist essentially. But I think there's a point where there's a justifiable means of self-defense when you engage with the electoral politics, particularly on the local level. But even on the national level, in terms of messaging, that was always like I had the privilege of working with, among others, David Nolan himself, who was a resident of Mission Viejo, California. He helped me on a couple projects when I was living in Huntington Beach in the '90s, and it was we staged some pretty cool demonstrations back in the day, grassroots stuff in the '90s, and I learned a lot kind of from his perspective that his intention behind the party was not necessarily to win national office or even larger offices, but to influence the discussion and to try to it really support kind of the down ticket with the top of the ticket. That was kind of the whole point. Was to win local office and build slowly. I remember a discussion I had with him in the '90s that was to the effect of we have an obligation, if nothing else, is just like be a placeholder in case there's a major shift that just simply happens, like it's not even necessarily in our control, but maybe there's another situation where like the Whigs went away to make room for the GOP, right? I mean, that's the GOP was one party, right? So he had a lot of interesting thoughts about that. Looking back, I wish I'd actually picked his brain a lot more than I did, but it was inspiring. I kind of get that. That's kind of the point. So that's kind of why I kind of justify, like, even though I fully understand like the Lysander Spooner approach and the Constitution is meaningless and this is all not gonna it doesn't matter, but electoral politics is horrible and all that stuff is true. But again, I think when you do it right, you're kind of engaging only in a means of self-defense when you engage the political system. So that's kind of my approach all these years.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, that is very interesting. I mean, the concept of using voter eligibility and electoral politics as a means of self-defense, because like it's no different from using economics, like counter economics as a form of self-defense as well. So, I mean, any means necessary to kind of divorce yourself from the state and go against your neighbor that wants to effectively kill you. Right. As Lysander Spooner would dissertate in his No Treason. I mean, because sadly, that's where we've kind of evolved as a society, or I would say devolved. I mean, we're all against each other, but yet we're all for the same thing. We all want economic freedom. We all want individual property rights. We all want to be left alone, but at the same time, it seems like we're going the wrong way about it, and where we're infighting. And I look at like today, I mean, and you can chime in and give your perspective, Mike, or Andrew as well. But I look at today and I see that we have all this infighting. You have the culture wars. You have all this chaotic identity politic bullcrap that's going on, and everybody's against one another on the surface level. But I honestly, I think it was probably much worse, like say in Lysander Spooner's time, or say during the progressive movement. We just see it more so now because of the real time, because of the rise of the internet, the information age, social media. So, I mean, it's basically like history repeats itself. We're always going to be infighting. We're always going to go at each other's throats for what we perceive is what the right thing is to what someone else's right thing is. Like, because what is morality? I mean, until they say it's legal.
Right. Yeah, I think this is by design. I do think to a certain extent, maybe it's just a technology also, but I do think it's kind of a much more deliberate design in recent decades. Because if you'll notice, like I even remember, and I'm old enough to remember, but it's true. I'm old enough to remember when you could have a bunch of close friends, and you were okay with the fact that somebody else held in that friend group held very different beliefs than yours. Like it was okay. You could actually go up like and have fun and have an entire social life with people who had radically different ideas about politics. But I mean, that's changed. Like they've taken. I think there's a deliberate war against nuance. Like they've almost vilified nuance from public discussion. And I think the cure to that is to bring back what's been lost, I think, in recent decades, which is civil discourse. Like it's certainly lost even within our own movement, right? The liberty movement blows my mind how much civil discourse has eroded. And I've seen a lot of there was definitely like hearty conflict back in the, when I started to get involved in the Libertarian Party back in the 90s or, up through the 2000s when I kind of started like to get distracted by other life things. Like I hit my 30s. I'm like, okay, I can't do this all, I can't stage things and do crazy libertarian anymore. But all the discussions and whatnot, were at least civil to a point, right? But now everything is just extremely tribal and absolutist within our own movement, let alone the larger society, right? Where there's no middle ground. There's no like, I'm not hearing this, I'm not going along with this. And it became very, very tribal, very, very, I think very, very fast. Although this has been decades in the making. And I do think, as you're saying, there's always been a natural tendency to have that sort of hostility towards differing beliefs. And to a certain extent, I think healthy, but then when you remove civil discourse from the equation altogether and you even vilify any kind of nuance, like to the point where you like, since you're showing any sign of dissension, you must be a agent of Putin, or you must be a insurrectionist, or you make all these, right? I mean, I think that's relatively new, right? Or you're an anti-vaxxer. Like that started a couple of years ago, right? You're an there's this sort of absolutism that is, I've never seen it quite this prevalent in my lifetime, and I do think, and I'm just paranoid enough to think it's by design.
Well, I mean, conflict does breed conflict does breed job security.
Yeah,
So
it does.
They have an incentive to be able to do something like that, so that they can maintain a revenue stream that benefits them personally.
You bet. And not to mention, it's very Machiavellian for those in power. You never want to have the people terribly united. I like this thing that Dave Smith came up with years ago, like kind of really bringing out the fact that all the wokeism and gender ideology really started to rise, like noticeably rise right after the Occupy Wall Street movement and the Tea Party started to coalesce and start to realize we have similar objectives, if not identical. And it's like, oh no, we can't have the people uniting. We need to get at each other's throats instead. And I think that's where we're at. So I do think there's a certain tolerance that individuals have towards differing views that is more instinctive than, especially on the personal level, just in social circles and whatnot, that's been deliberately sabotaged. Because now even I mean, I noticed even in my own friend groups like that, the COVID lockdowns, that was a sword of division, right? That was just like I won't even talk to anymore, and vice versa, because because they're Nazis as far as I'm concerned. They're authoritarian.
Yeah,
they're really bad. I mean, because at some point you have to realize you are a cheerleader for dystopia, and the fact that you don't see it is terrifying enough that I can't have anything to do with it. And they think I'm terrifying because I was all about like, why? You don't need to be doing all this stuff. Like a genuine crisis doesn't require this much marketing. It doesn't require this much of a hard sell on the population to be able to convince people just by them, by their own subjective experience, or else it's probably not a real thing. Like there's a level of cognitive dissonance that that I don't think we can necessarily come back from that easily. But I do think that a concerted effort to restore civil discourse would be a good thing overall, because I think that's what's been lost. I think it's been deliberately sabotaged.
Yeah, and the thing about the civil discourse is we knew that we kind of saw the eradication of it
Yeah,
on the mainstream of it with COVID, and then the latter half of the COVID lockdowns and vaccine mandates and mask mandates, when you started seeing the kind of the severing away from COVID, because I knew that was failing and moving on to other topics, such as like the abortion ruling. What was it, a couple years ago? And then
right.
you start seeing kind of the right becoming more so like the left during the COVID lockdowns and mask and vaccine ordeal, where the left was calling for uh, literal bodily control by authoritarians. And now you're back to the same narrative to the where the left has always been, where it was about bodily choice. So like the right was discussing, the right was yelling for bodily choice during COVID, and then now we're kind of simmering back down to that balance, like with the abortion issue or with the
Yep.
wars or whatever. It's like the right, yeah. So I mean, I think you hit it right there. It's like civil discourse. We can agree to disagree, and
Yeah,
that's how we
there's
come up with solutions.
that it is right. It is also the if you think about it, it's antithesis to it's the antithesis to politics, right? The politics right now
Hmm.
seems to be driven by absolute tribalism. Like the other side is
Hmm.
absolutely evil, and we are absolutely good. And there's no middle ground. There's no like, well, maybe there are some people on our team that maybe aren't so great, or maybe there's some
Hmm.
things that the White House is doing isn't so great. There's no middle ground, and that's I think it only serves the people in power. It doesn't serve the population that's supposed to be
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
living under this authority.
Hmm. Yeah, it's amazing how politics shifts, like because of the tribes and all that. I mean, especially like I don't know with the Afghanistan thing. Oh, that's a good thing that we pulled out of Afghanistan, but then you have two sides saying, well, Biden fucked up and he
Yeah,
gave all these weapons to the Taliban, and look what happened when we withdrew the way that we withdrew, and then yeah, but then if you really look into it, yeah, it was actually under the Trump administration that it started getting the workaround. And then when Trump was out of office, they still had this probably 6 months, 6 months, maybe even a year to truly pull complete withdrawal out of Afghanistan the right way. But it's almost
right,
like it's a political discourse thing where like, oh, we got to make it look like we botched this, and then it'll all be blamed on Trump, right? And then of
right,
course it kind of gets thrown back into the Biden administration's face, because then it's under your watch. You
right.
kind of screwed up because that was the plan. So, and then you start seeing the infighting of the culture war yet again. The
Mhm.
tribalism comes out yet again because of that. I
Yep.
mean, we're
Yeah.
especially within the Libertarian Party.
It's really bad. Yeah, I think that's where it gets to be. Like I want to like clean up our own house, a little bit.
Hmm.
Kind of important that we do, because we have to kind of tolerate each other's perspectives. Like
Hmm.
what I've discovered is, that there's a plenty of room for a Nozikian, like a minarchist, and or do you call it minarchist? I don't know. I've heard both pronounced both ways, but there for
Hmm.
minarchists, anarchists, agorists. There's room for all of us to work together towards a common goal, right? There really is. I don't see how it's gotten to be so bad. It's like, look, I've changed my certain views over the years, but the bottom line that I see most sort of urgently necessary for changing our own factionalism is when it comes to local politics. And just to the north of me in Huntington Beach, California, is a case study that I'm trying to um, kind of encapsulate and get into a national and even international movement, which is the idea. I'm calling it township liberation right now, because what happened in Huntington Beach in 2022 was a coalition of sort of legitimately right-wing conservatives, liberty-leaning patriots, and straight-up libertarians. Like basically formed a coalition and ran a slate of candidates in 2022 that won in a landslide. They have a majority of a strong majority on the city council, and since then, like it or not, they've been able to nullify and challenge rulings from Sacramento and even Washington D.C. essentially, to the point where they've made it illegal to have a lockdown. They made it illegal to impose a mask or vaccine mandate in the city of Huntington Beach. There's also other rulings that they've removed gender and race-based like events, from the city and whatnot. So that's kind of more like the right-wing-ish side, right? It's like we're gonna we're not going to celebrate Black History Month. We'll celebrate history, and we may highlight Black accomplishments, but we're not going to call it Black history. We're not going to segregate history. Like I kind of understand too, to a point. And thankfully the city council members are despite having vehement opposition, on the council from even the mayor, who's part of the more left-wing slate that's left behind. They've managed to really articulate their positions well enough, and again, the city majority is really, really solidly behind them. So it's like they're enjoying a strong victory there, and to me, it's again a case study of how local politics can be done, at least insofar as using a local governing body to nullify the larger, more oppressive governing bodies above it, right? And that's to me that's actually a really good formula. And any country with a common law background, there's a precedent for that. There's a way this can be adapted, not just throughout the U.S., but like why not Canada, UK, Australia? My friend in Nigeria, Econ Bro. I mean, this could be something that can be helpful if applied anywhere with any country with, I think, any kind of common law background, or and even those that don't, because if you have one governing body that's localized, it can form like almost like a hedge around that area, right? And to a certain extent, I think the Free Staters in New Hampshire have just managed are trying to do the same kind of thing, but statewide, right? Like where the state of New Hampshire just nullifies anything coming from Washington, D.C. I think that's a great strategy too. And I think I might as well just plug them for a minute and say, New Hampshire should be a plan B, for at least a plan B, if not a plan A, for every, a liberty advocate across the world. Let's all have that as our backup plan, if not our first plan, to coalesce there in one geographic region and make our stand. But there's certainly a version of that where people can conceivably do the same thing locally or in a nearby community. Like I don't currently live in Huntington Beach, but I think it's I'm close enough to where if I need to, I can get there and I can protect myself in a sense using that tactic. I think there's something to be said about engaging in the electoral system as a means of self-defense. They're using local politics to nullify larger governing bodies, and I think that's actually a great plan.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like from the perspective of using the partyarchy in politics, I mean, as much as me and Andrew disdain it, localism is the way to go, because like you do have that nullification. Like one aspect, like just on an individual level, understand jury nullification. I mean, when it comes to jury duty, I mean, or just understand that you can different ways of just getting out of it, but teaching people that there are ways of getting out of something that you don't agree with, or just local politics in general.
There's a long, beautiful history of nullification. I mean, in a way, I mean, and this not to get too far off topic, but it seems like the United States was a great experiment in individual rights, and whatever patriotism or even nationalism I might feel is because it's thus far been the most successful experiment in individual rights. That's why I'm proud to be an American. Well, yeah, in that sense, right? Because we pulled this off in a way that no place else in the world has. Still highly imperfect, but it took really three civil rights revolutions, not just one, to kind of get close to being the way it should be. It took not just the revolution, but the abolition, not the Civil War, but abolition.
Abolition, yep.
And it took the suffrage movement to like say, okay, yeah, women, oh yeah, you guys, yeah, you're individuals too. How about that? But that's the whole individual rights revolution in three stages is still pretty unprecedented. So in that sense, I think if we're going to have any sort of victory for liberty, it's to take that history and expand on it, and I think, as you said, apply it locally. One of the things going back to David Nolan, who again I wish I had picked his brain a lot more than I did. The things you regret, right? But I at least was able to absorb the idea that running candidates on a national scale or even a statewide scale, any large scale national office, it just basically is meant to serve messaging and helping the down ticket, helping even with the local races, which aren't even necessarily partisan, like local races in California. You don't identify, you don't have to identify your party, right? I think it's probably true in where you guys are too. It's not necessarily a partisan thing, but the partisan races, larger offices can help, not just with the messaging, but ideally it can help the down ticket. It can help actually acquire victory on a local level, and that's where it matters most. If you think about it, like if we had pockets of resistance, like different townships across the country, let alone across the world. That's another thing you'll notice about my view of the liberty movement is it's not just like we need to export this, right? Like whatever successes we had here needs to be exported. Like I'm a huge fan of Brexit, right? I think that was just that's great, right? Like let's break, let's keep exporting our freedom values. Maybe we'll even start arming some of these countries. Like God, the Nigerians need to be armed to their teeth. Like those guys, like I wish that like they have such strict gun control laws, and naturally it's a predatory, like a super predatory, violent environment because the people aren't allowed to defend themselves. Like I would love to see that completely inverted in the years to come. And we'll watch what happens. It's like no more kidnappers. No more right. Christians. But I think the idea is local. It is where we're going to have our success, right? It's in local politics, right? Local municipalities, local townships, and that's why again I keep coming back to township liberation. In fact, one of the things I'm doing with this discussing this with you guys and why I thought it was important is like, how seriously do I need to take this concept? Do I need to start do I need to get this going? Is this can this really, are other people sensing that this is a strong thing to be doing? Because it's not just Huntington Beach. That's just the closest to me, but there's other parts of California, and I'm sure there's other parts of the country that have seen some success like this, right? That have seen some degree. Let's unify. Like I don't. There's plenty of things like that I would disagree with some of the conservatives around here about that I have my whole life. But if it means like nullifying the real enemy, like if it means putting a wrench in the dystopia and like stopping its advance in this little pocket that we have, I'm all for it. Let's do it. Let's work together.
Yeah, it seems like the best option would be localism because it represents the idea of what the experiment was supposed to be, right? The American experiment is we're a nation of rights, not a nation of laws. And I think the Civil War proved that you have an encroaching national government that wants to put it back to the Lysander Spooner picture and the Constitution, a national government that wanted to supplant the all central authority of the Constitution, which is effectively just a piece of paper. I mean, and after the Civil War, you started seeing more of that imperialistic function of Washington expand, centerfold, like cement your control and put in place your laws. And when you put in place too many laws, you're going to create more criminals. So, slavery didn't end with the Civil War. It just got exasperated and expanded because now we're all criminals. I mean, for the most part, if we break the law. I mean, and it's a lot of racism into it too, because the real reason for the little people miss in the 13th Amendment, like slavery ended. Yeah, black men have voting rights, but if you break the law, that's where slavery can be utilized, is for incarcerated individuals, and who were the number one individuals that would get arrested and locked away in a cage and forced to work on chain gangs.
That's right.
Blacks in the yeah, blacks in the South.
Yep.
And we could go on a right wing tangent and be like, well, it was the remember Democratic Party, but I
But yeah,
mean,
let's. I mean, when was the? I mean, if we are really to be objective about national leadership, was there anything?
mhm,
After, there really wasn't a president after Calvin Coolidge that understood limited government or actually practiced limited government, right? I mean,
mhm.
there's a lot. That was it. It ended with Coolidge. It really did. He was like
It
he was
really,
to even have an inkling of
mhm,
what the Constitution was supposed to be about, you know,
mhm,
and so it kind of just I think it kind of died, and that was and he even was suffering under centralized banking and all these things that he despised. He was still ineffective in getting like in
mhm,
reverse Federal Reserve Act. Not to say he. I mean, there's only so much he can do, but he put up, I guess you could say, a fight. But I mean, you know, Wilson's nonsense. He wasn't really effectively able to reverse any of that, and it's if anything,
mhm,
he kind of just stopped the flow of the dystopia for a short while. But man, you know, right after he
mhm,
left office, it just picked right up where it was left off,
mhm,
and we've been descending towards dystopia ever since. And
mhm,
and you know, one of the disturbing things that we kind of talked about at the beginning of the show was how much of a warm welcome dystopia has received by far too many of our fellow citizens, right? I mean, it's like
mhm,
with absolute cheers, and to the point where it was very reminiscent of like East Germany or Nazi Germany, or like it's this very kind of dark kind of embrace of a very deep authoritarianism that I don't really like calling it authoritarianism anymore. It's dystopianism, right? It's just you
mhm,
absolutely want, you know, this massive central. You're so afraid. You've been brainwashed to be so fearful that you absolutely welcome this, you know, a straight up dystopian centralized power in the most far-reaching sense that this country's ever seen, and they embraced it with open arms, to the point where they were almost critical of the government for not being. Like I've actually met people who think the government didn't do enough, right, to stop COVID. You know, it just blows my mind how that was so warmly embraced and so welcomed by far too many people. So that there is that sort of you know that sort of disappointing, like gnawing, like danger. But again, if civil discourse was, you know, wasn't, I think, so deliberately sabotaged, I think maybe like we could have retained some degree of common sense, but it was thrown out the window in 2020.
mhm. Yeah. Why is it that people subject themselves towards a dystopian view? Is it just a sheer lure of safety and security, or I mean, or what? Why is it that most people kind of want that go that, or they don't want to go that route, but they tend to follow that route?
Yeah, I think this is I'm going to try not to preach here because it's only Monday, but I think it's a straight up idolatry. It's idolatry. I mean,
Hmm.
statism is a form of idolatry, right? A politician worship is a form of idolatry. I keep bringing up, once again, bring up my friend Econ Bro from Nigeria. One of his missions is to end the idolatry of politician worship in Nigeria. I'm like, we need to end that in the United States. What are you talking about, Nigeria?
Hmm.
We worship these clowns. You know, it's like
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
what's worse is like you remember the whole idea of bread and circuses, right? Being the distraction of the
Yeah.
masses. Well,
Hmm.
politics has in this country, and I think in most countries, and not just in the West, like I said, Nigeria, politics has become the bread and circuses. It is the entertainment, or as Frank Zappa said, you know, politics is the entertainment division of the military industrial complex, right? it's our political world has become the bread and circuses. It's now the new entertainment. I mean, forget NFL or NHL. I mean, it's now politics itself is the actual distraction. It's all
Well,
theater.
now the politics are I would say the sports. I mean, all that entertainment's an escape. So now the politics are starting to seep into the sports. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
yeah, yeah.
Very true. Well, yeah, isn't it right? Because that all the identity politics crept into sports and everything. When it in a sort of neutral environment, or for the longest time, again, like discourse. It's like I could go to a hockey game, right? And watch, my team of Canadians fight your team of Canadians, and get along, even though we held radically different beliefs, right? And we could have a good time in the stadium. But not anymore. Now it's like take a side, even at the hockey match, right? I mean, even at the football game. So it's weird to me that it's gone this far, but we have to admit that it has, and that it's that deep of an infection. But I also, again, come back to the fact that now everybody's focused on the political theater. That's at least become part of the bread and circus distraction, because let's face it, and this is where I've held this position since my teens and early 20s, and that's that the two major parties are really just nothing more than mutual controlled opposition anyway, right? They've always been like since Coolidge, really, right? They've always been just a mutual controlled opposition, but now that theater of mutual controlled opposition is its own distraction, and we elevate these figures, right? I mean, it's bizarre. For a while there, it seemed like the I don't know if you noticed, but it seems like the left wing like pundit machine was trying to elevate like a Joe Biden to a cult status, like it was almost like they're envious of the cultish devotion of Donald Trump among the political right, so they had to like duplicate that with Joe Biden, which is ridiculous. Like this guy doesn't he doesn't have I mean, not a huge fan of Trump, obviously, but it's like Joe Biden does not have 1/100th the charisma and personality of Donald Trump. Never will, right?
No.
But they tried to duplicate that. It's like, oh, we have our people that worship him too. I've heard that what's that one account, the Joe, whatever. She was like, oh my God, he smells like whatever. Joe Biden's so great. It's weird how this cult like personality, the cult of personality, like the old song, right? Has to such an extent that now we have full blown politician worship. We're here, and it is this weird sort of cultish kind of thing, and it's freaky. I don't like it.
Andrew, you have something to say? You've been quiet.
I just think, you say cult personality, every centralized governance has it, like,
that's right,
going back thousands of years. So
true, right? I mean, it does sort of remind me of like where you had, like, how's it that different from monarchy? If you think about it, it's like we have, right? I mean, it's not that different from that. It's just, okay, we change monarchs every so often, but it's the same form of idolatry, right? And again, don't mean to preach, but these are all false gods. Like it infuriates me to that level. Like these people are there's people that they don't deserve any more adoration or attention than you yourself do. Like why aren't you elevating yourself to the level of these political figures? Like, oh, so I'm going to vote for so and so because they're going to save me. It's just it's so off-putting to me now, more than ever. Like it always was, but now in my 50s, I'm like, you guys are, come on, this is ridiculous. Be serious about this.
Yeah, and speaking of the idolatry, I mean, we discussed this a little bit when we had Alex Bernardo on from Protestant Libertarian Podcast, and I mean the Israelites, I mean, when they wanted to have a king, I mean, they came to Samuel and said, we want a king. Talk to God. I mean, see if we can get a king, anoint us a king, and he even warned us, and God told Samuel to warn them, like, okay, this is going to happen if you're if you have a king, you do realize if you want to be like everybody else, you're gonna pay the king. The king's gonna own you. That you're gonna fight the king's wars.
Yeah,
So
you're gonna pay the king a tenth of your income. Like, can you imagine?
mhm.
Like how
Yep.
fantastic, right? A tenth. Yeah, and that was the dire warning from Samuel. He'll take a tenth of.
Mhm.
So the idolatry is real. The fact that
Mhm.
this almost religious like cult like devotion to various statist causes is real, and I think it needs to be addressed like that. Like everybody needs to just dial back. Like there's got to be a way to kind of make that less fashionable, if that makes any kind of sense. Like it just sort of challenge
Mhm.
the premise a little bit. That's where I think engaging with the culture is actually important too, um, because there's no balance. Like there's no nuance anymore. Like I was saying earlier on, and you guys kind of you knew what I was talking about, because there's no, everything is so draped in absolutes that it's actually very detrimental to anything good for society. It's great for the ruling class. It's certainly great for those that love dystopia and want to just give up all power to somebody else to make all their decisions. But it's not conducive to a free society, and I think we've really lost that. I think there's been a cultural rejection almost
Yeah.
of that kind of thinking. It's like, oh, we don't want to be thinking for ourselves. We want to be controlled. It was like we need to be led. These are it is really, it's disheartening. But again, I think it's also by design, and we can kind of challenge that design. Like I've been saying, I think I'm inspired now the success of certain local governing bodies. I come back to, like, that tells me that there are enough people that are awake that it can make a difference, at least locally.
Mhm.
Mhm.
What I worry about is, the quality of the impression that you leave and how long it lasts when there's constantly, shifting immigration in in United States, like the New Hampshire, the Free State Project in New Hampshire, right?
Right.
It is a concentrated effort for people to go there and try to implement more libertarian principles, but
Right.
it's not just people from with those points of view, and they're getting drowned out. How long has this been running for, and it's still struggling.
Yeah, I think the larger the territory, the more challenging that strategy will be. Right. It's like a higher state, even the size of New Hampshire, which isn't a gigantic state by any means, but it's still the larger the territory, the more challenging it is to implement that sort of thing. So really, what I look at, it still comes back to a localized area. And so if I was to look at New Hampshire and kind of in defense of their point of view, the Free Staters, I
Mhm.
think that if they have enough townships and municipalities within New Hampshire to where, like, it doesn't take the whole state, right?
Yeah.
It just takes maybe a couple dozen township, maybe a significant sized town or two, and then maybe a dozen or so small ones. And you're going to be you'll pull it off essentially, because that's enough of a demographic to be in what I guess the term would be entrenched. Like,
Mm.
I think you can really pull it off. You need maybe a dozen, little more township, like, reasonably sized to even slightly smaller municipalities, to maybe one significant sized town like Huntington Beach, California. Pretty big town, honestly. It's one of the
Yeah.
larger towns
Mhm.
in Orange County. You just need like one or two of those, and a dozen smaller ones, and in one state the size of New Hampshire, and you'll have pulled it off. It works as long as you can kind of retain uh, uh, that strength for liberty in those areas, or balance it with a few others that maybe pop up. Uh, that I think you can kind of pull it off. That's still a free enough state, right? Does that make sense?
3% of the population, right? That's what they said. All we need.
Right. That's it. And you're at least, you know, uh, and you have at least an entrenched defense for individual liberty. So I think, while it's definitely it takes a lot of faith and vision and long-term thinking, I think they still have the right idea. And like, I'll keep coming back to this. Like, that should be every liberty advocate's plan B. If not their plan A, is to do exactly that, to find their way to New Hampshire and be willing to concentrate, your strength in certain parts of New Hampshire, to ensure that sort of defensive line, right? To make sure it holds. But I think that's a fairly viable strategy, honestly. If we're going to look at it that way, I also think that here in California, what I'm going to be pursuing, I don't think I can get away from this. I think I have to kind of reactivate and come out of quasi-libertarian retirement and actually get this idea of township liberation started, because I think it could lead to at least a functional separation of California. I mean, there's so many pockets of resistance that are already here in California that just the wholesale reject Sacramento,
Mhm.
the leadership of our dystopian governor. And I think that's also true in almost every state. So if we emphasize that in every state, we'll find the states and the places and the regions of the country and even the world where that's going to succeed and where it's not. And I think that's going to be. I think it's important to find. It's almost like testing the weakness, right? We need to find those spots throughout the country, throughout the world where it's successful, and I think we'll know that over the next. Call me optimistic, but I think we'll kind of know where our successes are most prevalent within the next 10 years, and kind of determine, okay, where should we all be? Should we be dispersed to the closest location where we've achieved some modicum of success in establishing individual liberty. But I do see this as kind of, as my handle implies, I do see decentralization as not just inevitable, but necessary, and it's just a manner of how things decentralize. I do think there are forces also. Another topic really is, how there are forces that are at work that are outside everyone's control. Even the dystopians can't control certain things, although they like to think they probably can. There are certain forces at work that might just lead to decentralization anyway, right? Like certain I hate to say catastrophic, but there's various scales of catastrophe that could lead to decentralization regardless, to the point where we're not even arguing about anarchy or agorism versus minarchism. It's like, okay, well, we have anarchy, it's here, and let's now discuss the merits of Nozikian minarchism. Do we really need now that all government's gone, because of some catastrophic event, let's give me the case and the argument why we should even start one again, from maybe a Nozick perspective, like, why is it even necessary? So it could very well be that at some point we're not even looking at trying to defend anarchy, right? Or trying to, like, it'll just be here, and need to, and so the minarchists will need to defend, like, why would you want to reestablish any kind of government? Like, it could go that route in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I don't know. But I do think that we have an opportunity to, at least from a local perspective, make a stand for liberty in various parts of the country, in various parts of the world, with New Hampshire maybe being the highest concentration of that type of thing, to make it worth pursuing, and to give me some sense of optimism and hope, even in light of this ascent of dystopia that we've seen, particularly in recent years.
We mentioned Brexit a little bit,
Yeah,
and we have the New Hampshire, the Free State project for New Hampshire going on, and they're relatively successful.
yeah.
How does Texas, with this Texas idea, how does that work out, and is it really a benefit right now, considering that states can be on their own smaller scale? If they were to decentralize away from the federal government, they could be just as tyrannical as the federal government.
They
So
could.
how how does that work for Texas if they were to want to succeed and successfully succeed again and become the Republic of Texas? I
Right.
mean,
I have some friends that are actually, they call themselves Texians now. They're not, they've renounced their American citizenship and are only citizens of Texas now. Uh, I think it's
that's awesome.
it is, right. I mean, honestly, it's
Yeah,
like I have to say, go for it. Let's see
yeah.
if your experiment will work versus what they're doing in New Hampshire.
Hmm.
And you know, I do think that it's I got to let them try it. Like let's see what happens.
Hmm.
Let's see if you guys can create something that's better than what we have out of DC. Because God knows, Washington DC is. Discussions on X is like, oh well, you know, unfortunately, you know, states can't do their own thing because of the Constitution or something. And you with Lysander Spooner in the background of your background there, you can imagine how I reacted to that. I was like, okay, come on. The federal government has already shredded the Constitution. You know, like it's not even
Yeah.
as the enemy of the Constitution for, yeah, I guess it's the Coolidge
Hmm.
administration. So let's not even talk about like with the authority of the Constitution to, you know, what the states can and can't,
Hmm.
because that's, you know, the federal government has forfeited their right to represent the Constitution for well over 100 years. Like let's not even talk about that for about 100 years anyway. So the way I'm looking at it is, yeah, you got to give them a shot, right? You got to see
Hmm.
where it goes. Could they become more authoritarian? That's the thing. I think Texas is kind of like not that different than Indiana, has a predisposition towards right dystopianism, right? They're
Yeah.
there's certain things about Texas that still, you know, very much rub me personally the wrong way as a Californian. They're like, really?
Hmm.
You know, you
Hmm.
guys do that? You guys really limit liberty like that? Like, but who knows? It can't be at this point. It can't be a whole lot worse than what's coming out of DC. You know, than
Hmm.
that. You know, den of thieves that occupies Congress. You know, I think they got to at least see where it takes them. And Lord knows, I know personally some people that are. Yeah, I'm Texian now. I'm not an American. I'm like, that's okay.
Right.
That's kind of, all right. That's great,
Hmm.
guys. Let's see what happens with that.
That's like what me and Andrew are gonna. He's gonna be a Liechtensteinian
Oh
pretty
well,
Yeah.
I
soon.
was thinking about,
Yeah,
instead of going to Free State Project, we just start a new project right here and go to Wyoming, and
we'll
everybody
go to
go to Wyoming
Wyoming.
because the population is a lot less dense.
Right, that's true. You know, a lot less dense
Yeah.
than New Hampshire. So your chances for freedom. Well, there's another. Who am I thinking of? These are people that are uh, the Catawba Native American. Another thing I got to forward to you guys. I
Hmm.
posted about it, but the Catawba Digital Economic Zone has a lot of promise to it insofar as creating an alternative, not only an alternative currency, but an alternative way of just organizing everything. It's extremely
Hmm.
agri nature, and it's based on, you know, a tribe that is all they're doing is asserting their rights as
Hmm.
promised by uh, essentially by common law, by the fact, hey, we made this treaty, we're exercising our rights under this treaty. And you know, I've been kicking it around with some of the people in that movement to say, like, well, wouldn't it be possible to open up citizenship to the Catawba digital, you know, or the Catawba tribe? Like, would you be willing to accept like immigrants, right? And not
Hmm.
geographically, but just like I hereby declare myself a member of the Catawba. Like, couldn't you like grant citizenship to anybody anywhere, and they become a citizen of the Catawba tribe? Anyway, I'm posing that discussion because that's kind of a good way to, like, you know, why can't I suddenly be a Southern Californian who's no longer an American but a member of the Catawba tribe? I have a citizenship to
Hmm.
this tribe, right? That exists, you know,
Hmm.
geographically far away from me, but I'm still one of their citizens, you know, living in a foreign country, right, of California, in the United States.
Hmm.
Like that's also a compelling thing too. Doesn't that entitle me to certain rights and immunities and whatnot?
Hmm.
So there's something to be said for that approach as well. And I think we're in an exciting age where I think that the forces of dystopia are so kind of, I think their hand has been forced. I mean, I'm reminded of what Justin Trudeau, since we're speaking of other countries, are elevate here. I'm reminded of what Justin Trudeau did to to his dissenters, and passing the now proven in their own court system proven illegal use of the Emergency Powers Act in Canada, where he froze bank accounts. I mean, to me, that was the most wonderfully, gloriously I love that he's so thin-skinned and cowardly, because that just told us what their next move is across the world, right? What they're going
Foreshadowing.
Right. That's a perfect, it's like a sniper field their position. It's like, okay, I know now the rest of the world knows what the next move is of their dystopian government, right? And I think it's a very telling thing. So what we end up doing is having a foreknowledge now of where this is going and how we need to protect ourselves, right? So I'm compelled with so we need to have a whole nother way to protect our just practical savings, as well as our any long-term wealth. We need to have, it just stepped up the need for defensive parameters around us as individuals, as liberty-loving individuals across the world. And now we know a little bit more about what we need to do. And like I said, it's horrible what happened to them, but I'm kind of thankful, because they kind of the liberty fighters and fighters for liberty in Canada kind of took one for the global team of the liberty team by being the first ones to subject themselves to that level of dystopian oppression. And now we know. So the rest of the world knows, and now they know. And of course, it cracks me up because, okay, well, the Canadian courts found that what Justin Trudeau did was illegal. Okay, what are the repercussions for Castro's bastard son? None, right? There's absolutely no. It's like, oh, it was illegal. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, that was we didn't. It's like he shouldn't have done that. Yeah, exactly. Right. He shouldn't have done that. Oh well. So
Justin.
Right. Exactly. He did slap on the hand, right? And then we have talk about a case of two different kinds of dystopianism. Like, the Conservative Party in Canada has Pierre Poilievre, right, who's articulate as heck, but toothless during the lockdowns, right? Like, where was this guy? Right? I feel bad because I'm not Canadian, so why am I talking about Canadian politics? Well, I know a lot of Canadians, right, and liberty-loving Canadians, and they're the first to point out, like, the Conservative Party was absolutely toothless during the whole COVID dilemma. Like they weren't quite as bad as the Conservatives in the UK were cheering on lockdowns, or like the many Republicans that did the same thing here in the. But I come back to the fact that local resistance is still kind of where it's at, right? I think that there's something to be said about like different pockets of like, say for example, I mean, the closest thing to Texas I think you have in Canada is Alberta, right? And right, and Albertans are kind of just a lot. The similarity between Albertans and Texans is strong, right? But I think rural Alberta has even more love and appreciation for individual liberty than Alberta as a whole. Much the same way that I think certain pockets of resistance within New Hampshire would be. It's all you need, right? It's really essentially all you need is maybe one or two large towns and then a whole bunch of small towns, and you've won that whole region. But the difference is, of course, with Alberta and Texas, this is a large geographic region. So, but I still think that strategy is worth experimenting with, on a large scale with, a Texit, or a free state of New Hampshire. Absolutely, it's worth it. We're seeing where that can go and putting some effort. But I think the real victories are going to be fought at the local level. And if you have enough small victories, you end up having a large victory, if that makes sense. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
Now, the only thing that I want to focus on is how do we get people, the majority of people, to have the mindset of individual liberty? Like, how do we get the rest of everybody to realize, hey, you have rights, natural rights to exist and be left alone and cooperate with whomever you want to cooperate or not cooperate with.
Right.
So how do we transition to that mindset in order to attain to that localist political regime that ties into nullificating?
Yeah, I think that comes back to reinvigorating civil discourse. This is yet another project that's falling around in my head. And I think
Mm-hmm.
obviously podcasts like this and people like ourselves across the world can actually shape. I thank God for the rise of alternative media, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
And citizen-based media, citizen-based journalism, whatever we call it. But I
Mm-hmm.
think a podcast of sorts is in order that I've been kicking around for a long time also, meaning for like several months, where like, wouldn't it be great to have like a round table of civil discourse? Like, let's
Mm-hmm.
just do civil discourse again as a podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just pick out some of the some of the most divisive topics, like I did in a recent post on X. Like, let's pick out some of the most divisive topics and just kick it around. Like, use
Mm-hmm.
civil discourse, right? Use and with that comes a sort of an intense moderation responsibility, because, like it or not, the baggage that comes with all these topics has already been well established, like to the point where people are going to bring a lot of emotionally charged stuff. We can imagine, particularly abortion, like we're talking about, the most nuanced and yet also most heavily emotionally charged issue
Mm-hmm.
that there could be. I mean, I have some pretty strong opinions about it, but I also know that my opinions don't matter as much as what we end up um, needing to accomplish to just move the conversation forward, and instead of just having this constant political uh, nonsense where it doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't make that doesn't advance our society any further. When we have this entrenched conflict, all it does is reward the existing power structure, and that's sort of the premise that I think we need to build on. Stop rewarding the conflict, stop rewarding the political theater. Let's actually solve the issue. I think one of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest paradigms, to answer your question, I think one of the biggest paradigms that needs to shift is that uh, the government and politicians don't want to solve problems. They're in
Yeah.
the business of not
Yo.
solving problems. They're in the business of not addressing those issues. They're in the
Mm-hmm.
position of keeping society as stagnant and dependent as possible. And if I was to pick the one paradigm upon which this hypothetical roundtable of civil discourse podcast would be about, it's the premise that we have to solve this ourselves, amongst ourselves. We have to solve these issues. We have to address these issues and move the discussion forward, because our politicians not only won't do it, but they will never want to do it. Our
Mm-hmm.
government sure as heck doesn't want to do it, because unresolved issues are the main bread and butter of the ruling party, right? The ruling government. Like the government does not want to solve these things. We have to do it ourselves. I think that's what's been lost, along with just the very nature of civility. I think that's something that anybody from any walk of life can at least enough of those types of people can recognize. Enough people from all walks of life can recognize the importance of reviving that. But I think that's how you cure it. You sort of directly counter the narrative in that you have to cling to your tribe or you lose everything, and that's the way you go about doing it. I think we just have to reinvent and reintroduce civil discourse back into the discussion, because I can't think of any other way to sort of cure the brainwashing.
Basically make Bill Maher great again, pretty much, because that's what his show used to be.
It
It used
used
to
to be,
be
right?
that, yeah, that civil
it,
discourse between different parties.
it is, right? And I think that needs to be reinvigorated, right? That needs to be,
Mm-hmm.
and it will require some heavier moderation, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
let's face it, there is a propensity to hostility that
Mm-hmm.
is massive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been building up for the last several years, so there's a lot to counteract. But I think that concept is still good, and I think it could catch on, and I think it would run, contrary to the wishes of the dystopian class across the world. But God knows that they may, I can see it now as far right broadcast, far right podcast, talking about getting along and creating constructive solutions to society's problems. I
No,
can,
you Nazis.
right. You wing bigots, You know, why would you do that? You know, it's like, oh, you're ruining things
Hmm.
by encouraging, you know, civil discussion. You must be, you know, supremacists. So
Hmm.
if you're kind of ready to tackle that at some point, I think that's what we need to do.
Well, you think about the USSR. I mean, um, after Stalin, the whole reform was because of the consequences of his behavior. So, you know, and in one way or another, it works its way out.
Yeah, it did. I mean, to the point of the fall of the Berlin Wall, right? I mean, so
Yes.
yeah, I think that's another interesting and valuable precedent, right? I mean, there are parts of the United States today, certainly California, that, you know, Stalin would be envious of, right? So to invoke Stalin, I think we certainly have a degree of urgency to doing that sort of counter programming, and I think it begins with uh, uh, efforts to show that people who disagree with you or you disagree with are not necessarily the villains you want to make them out to be on an individual scale. No, if they're seeking electoral office or if they're holding electoral office, different story. They probably are the enemy, you know. But
Yeah.
if they're just your rank and file everyday person that's trying to get by in this, you know, in this crazy, ascending dystopia world that we're in, then yeah, we need to give those people a shot. You know, let's hear them out. Let's have them hear us out. You know, and let's see where the pieces really fall. Because at this point, you know, everything, you know, even of course, media has been far too centralized. You know, and so people are yeah, it's basically cultism writ large, and that's it's going to take a writ large deprogramming effort to counteract that and to undo some damage, which we'll never be able to fully undo, I don't think. But we can at least get, like I said, it doesn't take everybody. We just need a couple, like a couple people to talk to a couple more people to get, yeah, just
Hmm.
get a little pocket uh, of open-minded people, you know, that weren't there before. And we'll see some more successes. And to your point, I don't think that there's any way to have even local successes that I'm talking about without that kind of civil discourse in play. Like, I don't think that would have been possible in Huntington Beach, California, for if there weren't lots of you know, means of communication and dialogue. If there wasn't already like a coalition between, as I said, it's a coalition between the right and this is a California thing. I think it might be different in other parts of the country and certainly other parts of the world, but in California, where, you know, the left dominates, the left absolutely dominates the political landscape. You know, it took a coalition of basically all non-left people, right, or you know, all non,
Hmm.
you know, left authoritarian or left dystopian people. Basically, anybody that wasn't part of the inner circle of the ruling supermajority to form a coalition, and it worked. And these city council members are not like there's one that's distinctly libertarian. There's one that's distinctly conservative and even has a little bit of neocon tendencies. And there's, you know,
Hmm.
a couple more patriot, you know, type right wingers. But they form, you know, together they form they formed a coalition, and you know, it worked. I think that formula, even though it doesn't necessarily have to be the exact same ideological representatives, but I think that's a winning formula. But I don't think it would work on a significant scale unless we have a way to have and a means to have a civil discourse, right, and to be able to engage with people in a real way, yeah, that is counter to the narrative that wants absolute tribalism. You know,
Hmm.
it mentioned earlier in the podcast, you know, to have uh, a way to have everybody at each other's throats. It's very rewarding for those in power to have the population fighting each other rather than fighting them.
Hmm.
Job
Yeah, I
security.
mean, politics divides. It really does.
Absolutely right, and
Hmm.
it's been particularly bad the last since the 2020 started, but it was always there.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
it's reaching like I said, it's we're at dystopian proportions now. There's it's that absolute in the mindsets of the people. So yeah, it's going to take a concerted effort to undo that and to deprogram from that. But I think a combination of localism and then, you know, sort of reviving the practice of civil discourse as much as possible. It's going to take both of those things to make a real difference.
And I mean, we know that the civil discourse and the unifying factor of different coalitions works. I mean, we've
Yeah.
seen it the last couple of years with like the anti-war movement. I mean,
Yeah.
they've held a couple rallies in DC, and it's been right and left. I mean, socialists, libertarians, conservatives, and Democrats like and Republicans like coming together, like normal people with their speak, and then not so normal people because they're public eye, I guess, but
Yeah.
coming together to go against the war machine. And then Huntington Beach, that's a coalition of a bunch of different right wing uh, ideologies coming together to nullify everything from the state to the county to the city and the township, just to make things a little bit more wholesome for
Yeah.
everybody that lives there.
It took a concerted effort uh,
Mm-hmm.
of to actually get to that point. And again, it's like
Mm-hmm.
sort of a right/libertarian coalition, but there may be other parts of the
Mm-hmm.
world where it needs to be more of a because there's old school left still out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are
Mm-hmm.
still. And RFK Jr. kind of proved that there's still old school leftists. I mean, I guess to an extent, Tulsi Gabbard represents that true, although I think she's just a centrist. But regardless, there are still old school lefties out there, the kind of which that I used to be very active with on the anti-war, anti-drug war. You know, they were definitely out there at one time in the 90s. They kind of disappeared during the Obama administration, right? But they didn't disappear entirely. You know, they're still out there. So I'm not opposed to that. You know, I think that
Mm-hmm.
anybody that is going to at least be willing to advance liberty by and who recognizes the danger of the larger governing bodies and is willing to nullify you know, the sort of corrupt and oppressive governance of the larger governing bodies is going to be an ally. Like I look at it again, it's like as like a spectrum of how much do you favor individual liberty over dystopia? And I still think there are people, you know, who are on the political left who are not part of the established political left that see the disconnect. And I'm still open to those people. I mean, it's not really important where somebody identifies themselves so much as what they're willing to do to nullify the larger governing bodies. Like do you see that as the greater threat? Do you you know? My big litmus test is where are you on the scale? Where are you on the scale of individual liberty versus dystopia? Like, how important do you find individual liberty, especially in light of this near dystopia that we're living under? So yeah, I think there's still tremendous potential for any type of coalition building, and I think it's absolutely necessary to test those waters and see where people fall. But it comes back to again, you know, how are we going to find these people? How are we going to align with them if there isn't, you know, a revival of sorts of civil discourse? Like let's at least get back to getting to a non-threatening, you know, means of discussion, you know, where we're not pointing fingers and being tribal with each other.
Sounds good. So, what are your thoughts on a national level? Now that we've mentioned RFK for a couple times now, what are your thoughts on RFK Jr.? I mean, is he for real or is he? I mean,
I think he's for real, for better or for worse, just like Donald Trump is. I mean, I don't think he's part of some conspiracy of being controlled opposition or this and that. I think he's just for real wrong on a few too many issues, right?
Yeah.
I think he's like, you know, I'm glad you're out there. You know, I don't think there's sort of sinister forces necessarily behind his the fact that he's, you know, risen to this level of attention. But I do think he's just wrong enough that I can't get behind him. But I'm glad he's there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I know he's not really in the race anymore, but thoughts on Vivek for the Republican side? It's like what are your thoughts on him if he wouldn't have dropped out for, I guess, the Trump something, I guess.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting case, isn't he? Right? I mean, he's got it.
He is.
I think, you know, there's definite cause for questioning his like his
Objectives.
yeah his
Mhm.
vaccine background, right? Like
Mhm.
I guess he was he's got kind of an interesting sort of pharmaceutical background, which makes him a somewhat of a questionable figure, right? Like I'm not entirely
Yep.
certain I trust this guy, right? You know,
Mhm.
like, but at the same time, I mean, articulate is like he's easily the most articulate person to come out of the Republican Party,
He has
you know,
been.
national level in a very long time. And boy, he also, to his credit, not that again, not that I'm 100% sold on him at all, but he certainly does get the whole concept of civil discourse, right? Like
Mhm.
all that. I don't think that was faked. Like some of the appearances that he did, where he's like, okay, I have a protester in the audience. Let's give them a mouthpiece. Like he's like he's pretty cool with that. Like that's something I don't get from any other like political figure on a national scale on
Mhm.
either side. And certainly Donald Trump's not going to do that, right?
No.
It's like
Yeah.
he's gonna like, yeah,
We'll be here all week.
yeah, go beat this guy up, and certainly nobody in the Biden camp is going to allow for that sort of thing. They're very absolutist. Like you're either with me or you're against democracy and you're against freedom and
Mhm.
you're insurrectionists. Like it's either me or you're an insurrectionist. So this was a healthy thing to see, even if I'm not completely sold on his authenticity yet because of his
Mhm.
background, which I'm sorry that is kind of a red flag, regardless of how much I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
So I think he's got the potential. So I think he's got the potential of being pretty close to the real deal if I can kind of get that my concerns about his pharmaceutical background kind of addressed. I don't think he's 100% right about certain things too. Obviously, like he's closer to libertarian, but he's still not, than
Mhm.
others. But I'm willing to like if he can just keep going with that whole civil discourse thing that he demonstrated at a number of his events that managed to be captured. I'm sure it probably happened at other times that weren't captured on video. Then I'm willing to watch this guy and see what happens with him.
And then another question on campaigns. How about the libertarian, the entire span of the libertarian wing? There's a number of guys in there. Who's your favorite to at least get the nomination for the messaging?
For the
Like
for
who has the better message?
for the messaging, I mean, you know, I mean, I have a personal affinity for Joshua, right? I mean, I do. It's just because I
Mm-hmm.
think, you know, I just like the guy. I don't always think he got the best approach, but I just like the guy personally. Just because he's super grassroots, super like you
Mm-hmm.
know, everyman Iowan, guy. Uh, but
Mm-hmm.
I think Dr. Rechtenwald's got a really formidable like presence. I think as far as this crop and I think I like Lars's credentials and the fact that he's willing to really just invest his own sacred fortune. Like one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence is like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
money to
Yeah.
get to get the. So I have and Mike Trematt's great in his messaging. I think for the most part. I even think, I mean, I can't deny that Chase Oliver generally has a good vibe with, particularly those coming from the political left, and I think that's
Yeah.
kind of, I think that's really important. I think
Mm-hmm.
there because like it or not, the political left is a diverse bunch. Also, they're not necessarily all a bunch of dystopians. I mean, I may find some of their economic views absolutely abhorrent, and some of their ideas about guns are ridiculously insane. But if anyone's going to find common ground with people who identify on the political left, it's going to be a Chase Oliver. So
Mm-hmm.
I see strengths in a lot of these different strengths in a lot of them, and that's kind of a good thing, considering
Yeah.
that some of the people that would have wanted to see in the race to be like the prime messenger of liberty in 2024 aren't in it at all, apparently, then
Mhm.
we're doing pretty good. If we just see what we have between the current crop of front runners, it's not so bad in terms of being a messenger.
And that's what it's about anymore. It's to get the message out. Because I mean, we know, I mean, on the national scale of things, I mean, no libertarians getting voted to become president. But if you can get somebody out there that can have the a good message that kind of trickles out towards all polarizations,
Right.
I mean, that's a win in my opinion. So, and I
Yeah.
think Lars said it best. I think um he said it, I mean, just 5%. I think it was Lars. I think Mike Termata actually said this too, but at least get that 5%, you're making a workaround towards a path towards messaging, messaging for liberty on all sides.
Viva got 8.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think if we end up with a candidate who can deliver a message that sounds like the adult in the room,
Mhm.
I think that's really good. I think I think Joe Jorgensen, God bless her, was trying to do that, but
Mhm.
there has to be a certain amount of strength and conviction, and I think it has to be some degree of significant charisma as well in order to really to achieve that. But yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
all we do, this goes back to some of the conversations I can barely remember that I had with David Nolan back in the 90s. Was the most hopeful thing would be to have the Libertarian Party be a placeholder, almost, in case one of the major two parties does do an implosion like the Whigs in the 19 or in the late 1850s and 1860s. Like if there's ever an implosion of one of the major two or both of them, would be fantastic. I mean, think of the placeholding we've been able to do so far, and in light of that, despite all of our massive internal dysfunctionality, right? We're basically like it is really like herding cats. It really is. We're just we're a mess in so many ways. We still are, but we've done a pretty good job of holding that third position, right? Like in a
Mhm.
two-party country, the fact that we've been able to survive this long as America's third largest party, so to speak. I mean, I think we shouldn't be, in a way, we shouldn't be so hard on ourselves. Like, just keep up doing what we're doing. Let, as David Nolan said, let the top of the ticket, kind of serve as the messengers and the support for the down ticket, where we're going to potentially have and already have had in some parts of the country some significant electoral victories. Yeah, and they may be nonpartisan races, but good. I mean,
Mhm.
mayors, councils. I mean, sheriffs would be huge, right? I mean, that's where we have
Mhm.
the overall the biggest pockets of resistance to Sacramento and Governor Newsom have been from sheriff's departments, like in
Mhm.
various county sheriffs. Like the Orange County sheriffs, where I live, I love these guys, and I'm not big on law enforcement. Okay, I'm very law enforcement skeptical, but I like our sheriff's department. I mean, there's something about sheriffs that I think is superior to city cops, honestly,
Mhm.
because there's more accountability built in. And not to mention that they're like, no, I'm not going to enforce unconstitutional orders. Yeah, that's sorry. That's
Mhm.
not, and listen, you don't get that from very many agents of the state, where I refuse to enforce what's unconstitutional. I mean, it's almost like the exception to the Spooner rule, right? That the Constitution's useless. Well, if sheriffs are refusing to enforce unconstitutional orders, then if nothing else, the Constitution is serving at least some kind of a purpose in that instance. So yeah, I think the messaging at the top of the ticket is super important, but whatever can help the down ticket is what I would be looking at. Like which of these candidates, and that's what I'm kind of still evaluating. And we have time
Mhm.
to figure this out. But who's going to best serve the down ticket? I think is the last remaining question we have among our slew of libertarian
Mhm.
candidates.
Yeah, I like that because I mean, Larry Short says the same thing. Like that's the reason why he entered it. Like he knows he's not going to win governor of New York, but
Right.
if
Although
he
he'd be
can,
governor of New
he
York.
would,
Yeah.
he would. But I mean, you get into that big scale campaign up at the top echelon, and then you just allow your message to trickle down while you promote all the little guys on that down ticket for the local jurisdictions and the counties and all that, and hope that that can kind of add some grandeur to the libertarian side of things. So
I think that's
but
good. And I think that's where I'm going to evaluate as we get closer to the time where I would evaluate my support is going to be on which candidate is going to probably best accomplish that. And I have a sort of an affection, I guess you could say, for Joshua, but maybe he's not going to actually pull that off. But I got to admit, that we have a pretty good crop to choose from right now, and so who help the down ticket the best, whose messaging is going to be strong, but is also going to help the down ticket the most, is going to be kind of what I'm looking at as we get closer to having to make that decision as Libertarian Party people.
that's it. Yeah, it sounds like the plan, really. Just cycle through and keep chugging away. That's the messaging here. Just keep chugging away.
Yeah. Let's continue to be players in the event there's some catastrophic event that all of a sudden propels us. Like I've studied like what happened to the Republican Party, right, which was a third party, and it took a major party imploding for them to rise up to being the second party as opposed to a third party. Like yeah, I realize it was the 1850s and 60s, but who's to say that won't happen again? Right. Yeah. I mean, it's you look at the division. I mean, one of the benefits, I think, of Trump being relatively sincere, although sincerely wrong in a number of issues, he was still, I think, relatively sincere. He like really shook up the GOP, I think, almost irreparably. And so that's the moment, like, let's hope they go the way of the Whigs, right? We rise because the Third Party the natural replacement for that. That's far-fetched, very pie in the sky, probably overly optimistic thinking, but since there is at least one precedent of that happening, why not at least be open to the possibility?
Exactly.
Pragmatic for whatever works.
Yeah, whatever gets the liberty, man. It's that's the thing, isn't it? Like let's get some wins for liberty in as many places as possible across the world, and let's see who's got the most success, and then and let's kind of start testing to see where we've seen the most victory, and then concentrate even more of our effort maybe in those geographic regions. Obviously, I think New Hampshire has sort of an edge. They're kind of in the front of that, but who's to say we can't duplicate that success elsewhere as well? Who knows? But I think that's our 10 to 20 year plan. Let's see where liberty takes the most hold, and has the most success in a local and a most regional sense. And there's obviously something to be said for national level politics or even international. I think there's a real need to work with other liberty movements and parties across the world and to coordinate and share successes and so on, and share strategies, best practices. I'm all about that. If you follow me at all on X, you guys know that I'm really into like what's happening in the Reform Party in the UK, like the libertarian wing of that party. What's happening, with the People's Party of Canada, the libertarian wing within that, libertarian wing with might still be within the Conservatives in Canada. Like what's happening with the now sort of skyrocketing seemingly in popularity Liberty movement and Libertarian Party in Australia. Like this is interesting. Like and I love what Econ Bro is doing to basically try to turn Nigeria a complete 180 direction from from straight up socialist like dystopia to anarcho-capitalism. It's like he's like basically doing a complete 180 in Nigeria. And boy, I can think of any one of these success stories, especially on a national scale, but even just in a regional and local, would be valuable. And so I think we all need to be connected to each other in a way, because God knows technology enables us to do that now. Let's take advantage of that. The enemies of liberty certainly take advantage of that, right? I mean, we haven't even touched on this, but think about how uniform, and this is not a week goes by on X where I don't comment. It still blows my mind every day when I think about how uniform the dystopian forces have been in the governments of the world against their governed. Like I don't remember a time, and I keep looking for this. Like, was there ever a time when I knew that similar dystopian ideologies, authoritarian ideologies were in play across the world, obviously, because that's still kind of the default position of any government. But the uniformity, that's new. I mean, I still haven't anybody that can cite, well, this is going on well before then. Well, yeah, maybe behind the scenes, but never has it been this overtly uniform that I can remember. Every single major government in the world uniformly oppressing their governed in the same way. So that's why it's like, well, for enemy, maybe we who love liberty in these countries should be doing it too. Like, they're coordinating against us, we should be coordinating against them.
Yeah, it's fascinating how it's kind of come up into the overt, like within like the last decade, and really showing the last couple of years of how like
2020.
So,
it's really
crypto and stuff like that. It's kind of put a fire under their butt. If they're going to go through what they want to do, they're going to do it pretty quick.
Yeah, there's some of that too. But again, all the more reason why I feel kind of compelled to be more aware of and coordinate as much as possible, and share stories, influences, best practices with liberty-minded people across the world, because we're certainly, and it's also been a heck of a unifying tool. Like, if for anybody, like, I honestly think that's another one of the reasons why we've had some degree of success in places like Huntington Beach is, a lot of people have been woken up to the same thing. Like, wow, they're really out to get us. Like, our government hates us. Like, this is not a joke. This is not a drill. This is a real dangerous thing. I'm not paranoid. I'm not crazy. I'm not just a conspiracy theorist. This is a very real, very tangible thing that I need to deal with, because if I don't, they're going to get away with imposing a global dystopia. So there's an emphasis on those that see the same thing, that maybe don't even come from quite the same ideology, that I think we should be exploring vigorously. And that's another reason why I think it's good to connect sort of internationally, because as I've observed, lots of people in other countries, maybe even coming from the political left, are like, holy crap, this is not okay. This is actually really terrifying, and have come to respect the ideas of individual liberty, and come to find a newfound skepticism of any centralized power. And that, of course, I celebrate that. Like, that needs to be, and we need to export that kind of skepticism. Like, yes, your government hates you. Wherever you are in the world, your government hates you. You need to do something about it. And that's a great part. It enhances our conversation. It used to be, remember that it used to be a cliche expression among the political left, think globally, act locally, right? That's true, though. That works, and we need to do that. As libertarians, as liberty-loving people, we need to think globally but act locally, right? And let the national messaging help the local efforts, but also learn from similar approaches across the world, similar adventures that they're having over there in defense of liberty in other parts of the world.
And that sort of thinking could be applied to the issues of the border that have been off and on for decades, but have really cycled into the peak of political upheaval now. Like, think globally, but act locally.
Yeah.
And how do you,
I don't see any other way to address that except for locally, because you're sure as heck not going to trust the federal government, who created the problem in the just to begin with, to come in and do things. So they're going to suddenly do the job they should have done all along. No, they're not to be trusted. So it has to be a local, or at most regional, response. And I had somebody online kind of say, well, that's not, the Constitution wouldn't authorize that. I'm like, it doesn't.
That's the Constitution.
Again, I know the guys with Lysander Spooner in the background are just going to laugh at that objection, but the point being is, okay, so I get it. You, sir, a person on X, believe the Constitution still has some validity that's worth looking at. Well, in that context, how can you tell me in good faith that the Constitution is even regarded as a
legitimate document.
By the federal government at all. Like the federal government is the enemy of the Constitution. So to say that, oh, but the Constitution tells us we need to give this power to the federal government, like that's not consistent. Let's at least acknowledge that the federal government has been itself unconstitutional, right? Really, since the Coolidge administration. Can we at least admit that, if not well before?
Well, it was unconstitutional before it was unconstitutional because it defied the articles just to pass itself.
Well, on my profile picture, I have the flag of the Whiskey Rebellion flying, right, on purpose, because, like, really, it's never been legitimate. So, and I'm okay with that. But what matters is, people have a healthy respect for the ideals behind the Constitution. So I will never, you can't form like we had in Huntington Beach without recognizing that people rightfully have an affinity for the principles behind the Constitution and what it's supposed to do, even if it doesn't really do it. So, I mean, I'll jive with those patriots just fine. Like, okay, cool. We have a, right. We're on the same team as far as I'm concerned. We're trying to achieve individual liberty in our lifetime and defend against, more importantly, defend against the dystopia that wants to crush that. So that's, I'm all about forming coalitions. And I was a community activist in the 90s. Essentially, I'm just libertarian style, and I will continue to be that, I guess, again, as I climb out of retirement, libertarian retirement anyway, to start moving that direction. I don't see as I have any other choice, because the fact is it's that urgent. I don't see, it's not going going to go away on its own. It's going to take action. It's going to take even that we can think of to get involved, and but it should be fun too, in a way, right? We can have fun.
No, it should be fun. I mean, you should always find like-minded people that want to have that experience and then bring in the fun of it. So, because it should know I mean, if you're gonna work hard, work smarter, not harder, and make it fun. So. And by making it fun, I mean, then you can have an easier way to kind of educate people in the values of individual liberty and economic freedom and this or that. So
if you're not having fun, I mean, that's really, I mean, again, when we have this hypothetical podcast that I may like draft you guys into doing of a roundtable of civil discourse. I mean, we should be having fun. Like, we should have some strong moderate, right? But we should, it should be a fun thing, because, again, it wasn't that long ago when we were able to have those kinds of discussions in a non-threatening and a fun way. Like, you could get around, you could sit around. And my friend Stephen McNamara from Scotland, right, libertarian from Scotland. He says, like, he always gets into it locally. Like, he debates with absolute status, at the town council meetings. But then they'll go to the pub afterwards, and like they'll be bitter enemies in the town council meeting. Then they'll go to the pub and just put back a few pints and have some scotch, obviously, and be fun with each other, right? Just get along, have a few laughs, and have fun after the fact. That to me is still one of the that's one of the last vestiges of civil discourse, like where we can debate, and we can have strong opposing positions, but come back after the fact and still be, and not only just be friends, but actually have fun on a few laughs and a few drinks. Why not? That's a good model to follow.
Well, that, and I would love to argue and debate with a Scotsman, because just the accent. Laddie.
If you guys don't follow, I think you guys do, but if you don't follow Stephen, he's a curator of ad hominem attacks. He has received, because he's a heavy set guy. It's so funny because particularly the political left, who should be like against body shaming, they go right for the throat. Like, they got like dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of ad hominem attacks on his weight, just on his weight and his appearance, like by tolerant leftists, right?
Are you telling me that the leftists are Redfield? I see the same thing with the Redfield.
but it's really it's great to have a laugh about it. Like it's like we have with the his ad hominem curation, is a source of great laughter, and it's fun. It's fun because it's almost how, first of all, from a argument standpoint, it's how you know you've won, right? Because it's like when they resort to slander and ad hominem, it's like you won, and it's like okay, they've got nothing, and it's almost a cause of celebration, and it's fun. It's great to have a laugh at your opponent's expense, especially. So but yeah, it's a great thing, and yeah, if you don't follow, I'm plugging the heck out of Stephen McNamara in this broadcast. Stephen, I hope you get to listen to this too. But yeah, everybody should be following you because your account, he picks fights with people just for the heck of it, status, and just gets in these huge. It's just great. Because as a Scottish Scotsman would, right? It's like just big fights for the heck.
In the business, we call this foreshadowing.
Yeah, right. So yeah, you can almost hear like the accent in his posts too. It's great. So you'll have to follow if you don't already. So that's but that's how you, because it should be fun to have a cause for individual liberty. It should actually be, it should be an enjoyable thing. And in that sense, I kind of missed my more activist days from the 90s. It's like I jokingly talk about coming out of retirement, but reality is it'll be fun actually. I'm kind of looking forward to it.
That's awesome, and looking forward to the coming out of retirement. So yeah.
You guys posted. I'm just kind of testing the waters a little bit to see, like, is this really a good idea to actually create a national/international organization that emphasizes local township liberation, like township liberation. Is that something that people can get behind, that people can resonate with and get behind? And if so, it's like, all right, I'll start this thing and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think it definitely is something that most people want to get behind. 'Cause I think at this point, everybody, they want the best for community, and they want to have those relationships, but at the same time, they want to kind of forget the failures of society. Like, and I look at society and community as something different. I think society is communities kind of gathered together under one roof, statism that the state kind of attempts to control, and then you have communities where the people are actually more endowed to one another and want to live and work and cooperate and just get along as best as they can. And if they don't get along, well, I mean, you find somewhere to compromise, or you just stay away from each other.
Right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either. There's nothing wrong with peacefully avoiding some people altogether. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can still hate and not have anything to do with each other. Peace and be peaceful about it. I think New Hampshire is kind of the best testing ground for that theory. Is in New Hampshire, but I think to a certain extent, so is Huntington Beach right now. I'm looking closely because they've ousted a lot of identity politics in recent months, in particular, like so to where it's like, okay, well, hopefully, this community doesn't feel like they're being targeted, like, but yet they're I mean, it's interesting. Like let's I want to see how it plays out. These are all just a bunch of experiments. Let's see which ends up being the most successful. And I think we have to at least try as much of this as possible for the next 10 years, because God knows, the dystopian forces aren't slowing down. And I try not to be too paranoid and too conspiratorial, but it's pretty clear that there is a global uniform, kind of dystopia at work. People use terms like globalist, and I hate that. That's too nice, right? Or elite. That sounds like, why would I call them elite? Like, they're not elite to me, but all I care about is that they're trying to mess with me personally, and everybody out, and that's not elite to me. That's just, there's bad actors on a global scale. So how do we push back? That's the experiment, right? Let's see who has the most success in that.
And I think Alex Jones just entered the room.
Right? Exactly. Right. Yeah. In a way, like God bless him. I mean,
he missed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chemicals in the water.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So,
right? Like, I mean, he has an audience for a reason, though, right? I mean, there's
mhm,
there. I think it's recognizable to most people who pay attention that there's something not quite right at work, and it's at a global scale. I think
mhm,
of course, those of us who are libertarians or anywhere on the anarchy spectrum, agorists, what have you, are looking at the intelligence agencies with even more skepticism than an Alex Jones, and have all
mhm,
along. But
mhm,
we recognize that there are forces at work that need to be countered for
mhm,
dystopian like forces that need to be challenged. And so let's pull out our best efforts, our best peaceful efforts, and see who has the most success over the next couple of decades anyway, and that'll kind of tell us what to do. And I say decades, but in reality, the timetable could accelerate at any time. Like, I need to be open to the fact that there's so
mhm,
much potential for another catastrophe. God knows dystopians love catastrophe, and they could orchestrate another one.
mhm. Yeah,
So let's see where the pieces fall. See who has the most success given the external circumstances that are not necessarily in our control. And that's, if I was to think of my most hopeful message, that's ultimately what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, it's like Rahm Emanuel said, don't let the crisis go to waste, right?
Yeah, they
speaking of a,
they've mastered
oh,
that.
go ahead. Yeah. Don't mind me, guys. If you see me like looking around, I got my cats. Speaking of chaos, they're all running around. You can't see them with the background, but they're all, yeah.
You can't see it with my background either, but I got two that decided to play chase. Which they use in
Nope.
the middle of the night. They did that 3 times during the podcast. I don't know whether the fact that I'm on a podcast or not. I'm not sure what their motivation is, but I've had to like calm down at least 3 different. It's like I got 2 cats that are brothers, and they're crazy. And they just
Hmm.
chase each other, which they never do in the morning. But here they are.
They usually do it in the morning, but about this time, they're typically done. No, they're. I guess it's Monday. It's
Right?
the Monday
Mm.
fever.
Yeah. They have had now they're zonked out completely. So yeah, whatever. They're just
Mm. Dude, they're cats. They're cat
yeah,
brothers. Yeah,
exactly.
that's who. Yeah, I
They
got
can
two
smell
right
the
now.
pheromones.
Yeah, something like
Yeah, something. So, well, with that, we've had a great discussion. I really don't want to end it. I think we could go like all day, hours and hours. We could probably go for like 4 weeks,
yeah,
Yeah.
honestly.
we could. And there's a lot to unpack. Yeah, and
Hmm.
I just hit the overall. Um, like we kept kind of at a high level, like a large
Hmm.
scale overall plans and ideas, but we didn't really dive into too much stuff in great detail. But we kind of hit all the important high level stuff. So I think if you want to come back and do some more at some point in the future, I'm totally open to that. But I also think
Let's do it.
there are some specific success stories like that we can.
Hmm.
In other words, I want to kind of test the waters a little bit. Maybe come back with you
Hmm.
to with some success stories, just not so successful, whatever it is. Like it's kind of worth revisiting this because I
Hmm.
think we have in a kind of a good strategy overall. Like I think I got some good enough ideas that are worth trying to implement, and it wouldn't hurt to come back and revisit like some specific. Like I took this action. Here's what happened, or or maybe even I spoke to thus and such person who tried this, and we could even relay some of that information as we go to try to get some discussion about actual practical events that took place and what it may
Yeah.
have done, what it may mean for individual liberty in this little pocket of the world.
Hmm. So yeah, we'll have to bring you back on, and
But
we ourselves are trying to do some type of roundtable that kind of just got sparked about a week ago, and we failed to jump on it yesterday. I'm glad that we were able to get on with you this morning, because we were actually planning on doing something for another episode as a roundtable yesterday, being Sunday, March 4th yesterday, this being March 5th, the day we record, and we still want to try to do that. So maybe we'll bring you on for that as well. Try to get a roundtable discussion.
Yeah, there's something to that as well, and I don't know what form that would necessarily take, but I do think that's how we kind of fix
Hmm.
the societal issues, right? That's how we kind of deprogram at least a little bit. We could
Hmm.
have any kind of success at all. It would be a source of deprogramming it, but it's going to take. That's kind of another more long term kind of thing. It's going to take time and traction, but I
Hmm.
think it's worth pursuing because it's almost like it's like a lost art we're trying to revive of civil discourse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
who besides libertarians should be leading that? Like we really should be
Hmm.
in, right? That's our thing.
Yeah.
Hmm. And
Definitely.
we got to start within the Libertarian Party. Go on, Andrew.
We
I
really
was
do.
saying, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So lots of infighting. Maybe we'll do the beta right now. We'll beta test
Yeah.
it right now, and then we'll move on and we'll try to get Dave Smith and Jack Lloyd, and then we'll just have them debate on the roads.
or so,
This is
or
our job
Or
security.
the parks,
yeah,
excuse
right, right.
me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Uh,
but Mike, it's been great having you on, and like I said, this will drop. Let's call it for this upcoming Saturday, Andrew.
yeah,
Friday or
I'll
Saturday.
try to get it this
Yeah,
Saturday. Yeah.
All
yeah.
right, good.
So, but no, it's been fun. So, anything to plug away? I mean, uh, call out your tag for X and anywhere else that people can follow you and
Yeah,
keep in touch.
at two free Mike is my handle on X. That for now is the only thing that I'm really on personally. I do some
Hmm.
work for other organizations that are dealing with some of the real heady like
Hmm.
topics. But that's we'll save that for another time. I might kind of introduce you guys to some of the people I work with that are dealing predominantly in technology and AI and countering the dystopian
Nice.
uses of AI and whatnot. Like I know some people who are a heck of a lot smarter than me who are dealing with this sort of stuff that might be of
Hmm.
interest for future topics. I may just connect you guys and like just introduce you and like what and be a viewer rather than a participant for other discussions. But yeah, for right now, at Two Free Mike on X, and love to interact with people there, and that's pretty much it for me.
And that will be down in the bottom. So make sure you look in the description, people. So,
Don't forget to like
all
and
right.
subscribe.
Yeah, right.
So like, subscribe, share everything, and follow Mike and follow Andrew too if you want to. Yeah, screw
Yes.
him.
Give me a
That's
reason to be on there.
you give him a reason to be on there, exactly. Or
Right.
I'm just hanging out
you
on
can find him on
MySpace, so I mean,
yeah
Good
yeah, you can find him on MySpace. So,
deal.
but like I said, it's been great having you on, Mike. Great discussion that we've had, and definitely want to do it again and keep doing it and keep everything alive for this liberty movement. So we gotta be able to talk to each other, especially for libertarians, because the enemy of the libertarian is the libertarian.
Right.
right?
Truly, truly.
It's like the groundskeeper Willie
So
meme.
so, but anything else on in your corner, Andrew? Any last minute discussions you want to drop
No,
or
I'm good.
comments?
I appreciate
All right.
you joining us, Mike.
Absolute pleasure, you guys. It was good to be here.
All right. Well, with that, that's Lysander Spinner. I keep pointing. Yeah. Lysander Spinner, the legacy, right? I am the legacy of Jennifer Aunt Kaiser. Love you, Mom. And that was I'm Zachary Kaiser. That's Andrew Joseph. That was Mike Decentralize on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, that just entered the room and just left pretty quickly. Uh, so let's free everybody of their week whenever you watch this or listen to this when it releases. So in the meantime, let's get decentralized.
Peace. Thanks for watching.